Hello and welcome. You're watching Head to Head. I'm Carrie Oderman with UATV. On December 5th, the Office of the Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court published its annual report on preliminary examination activities. This report also includes a description of the case of the war in the Donbas region, which is currently at the stage of preliminary consideration by the Prosecutor's Office of the ICC. To discuss this report, we're joined in the studio today by Vitalia Lebid, a lawyer at the Strategic Litigation Center of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union.
Hello.
Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
The annual report obviously comes out each year, and this is of interest to us because they mention activities in Donbas. What exactly does it outline?
Actually, the preliminary examination of the situation in Ukraine began by the Prosecutor Office of the International Criminal Court since April 2014. And each year, the International Criminal Court publishes its report according to the results of such preliminary examination. And despite the fact that Ukraine is not still ratified, it's not still the party of the Rome Statute of the ICC, but there is a legal basis to start such preliminary examination due to the declaration of the Parliament of Ukraine. And actually, this report allows us to assess and to monitor how the proceeding is going on, and so we may be informed about the results of such a preliminary examination. Actually, today Ukraine is on the third phase of such preliminary examination, and maybe let me explain what does it mean, this preliminary examination.
I'd like to know that very much, but some of our viewers might not even be familiar with what the Rome Statute is.
Okay. Rome Statute is the international agreement, international document, is the main document that on the basis of which the International Criminal Court is functioning. So, and also this Rome Statute includes the main crimes that are under the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court.
So to speak, almost like a catalog of when this is done,
yes,
that falls under the jurisdiction of the ICC.
Yes, and the procedure of the International Criminal Court. And actually, the preliminary examination is the first key stage of the examination of armed conflict in different countries. And there are 4 phases of this preliminary examination, and we have successfully moved to the first 2 phases. The first phase is preliminary assessment of the main documents and the main evidence, and the second stage is about jurisdiction, whether the court has a subject matter jurisdiction on the alleged crimes. And the third stage, I assume that the most complex and last longer stage, because it contains too many issues: gravity of crimes and complementarity. And the principle of complementarity is a basic principle of International Criminal Court, and it means that the ICC may investigate only those crimes when the national investigation cannot prosecute some perpetrator of this most serious crime. So actually, at this stage, court should define whether Ukrainian enforcement bodies investigate this crime and whether our state has ability to investigate them.
Can we talk a little bit about what kind of crimes are investigated? What kind of, where does the ICC come in?
There are 2 main types of crime: war crime and crime against humanity. And actually, there are 3 main episodes under the jurisdiction of ICC regarding Ukraine. It's Maidan events, East Ukraine, and Crimea.
Okay, how are the Maidan events qualified?
Actually, it's not qualified in the report, but there are qualifications for the crimes regarding the Donbas and the Crimea. As to the Donbas, it qualified that there are war crimes, crimes against humanity, namely willful killing, enforcement and also extrajudicial killing, tortures. There are also different sexual violence crimes. As to the Crimea, it's also the same crimes, but also it is, for example, forcible transfer of people, deportation of, for example, prisoners of war, and also seizure of property and persecution for political reasons, for example, Crimea Tatars.
It seems like the Ukraine offers quite a bit of points for the ICC to investigate. Why hasn't Ukraine ratified the Rome Statute yet?
It's not an easy question because actually right now there are no legal obstacles for Ukraine to ratify the Rome Statute, and I think that it is only a question of time. But until 2016 there was legal obstacles for it, because in 2000 Ukraine signed the Rome Statute, but then in 2001 the Constitutional Court of Ukraine defined that Rome Statute contradicted to the Constitution of Ukraine. Okay. And then I think that until the beginning of the armed conflict of Ukraine, the issue of ratification of the Rome Statute was not on the political agenda for Ukraine. It wasn't relevant. But now, after the Revolution of Dignity, of course, it became relevant for us. And as I mentioned before, in 2014, the Parliament of Ukraine issued a declaration that recognized and accepts the jurisdiction of International Criminal Court. And in 2016, the Parliament amended our constitution and add a special provision that allowed to found the jurisdiction of the International Criminal Court. And there was 3-year period for this, for the entering into force of this provision in our constitution. And actually, since June 2019, this provision in the constitution entered into force, and since that time, there are no legal obstacles for Ukraine for ratification.
So Ukraine is going towards the Rome Statute. What role do NGOs have right now in linking the ICC with actions in Ukraine and activities?
I also want to mention to my previous that moreover, the ratification of Rome Statute is international obligation for Ukraine under the agreement of association with the European Union. Yes, and as to the role of the NGO, so NGO may submit evidence to the International Criminal Court, and I know that many national NGOs and international, and actually my organization, Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union, prepared 8 submissions to the Prosecutor Office. Actually, NGO since the beginning of the conflict, collected lots of evidence. They interrogate witnesses, they collect testimonies and statements of witnesses, and it's all these witness statements are the key evidence in this procedure that contains the information about war crimes and crimes against humanity in Crimea and in Donbas. So actually all this information we sent to the Prosecutor Office, and further they analyze this information, and we hope that in the future they will open the full investigation as to this situation in Ukraine.
International law, there's very many technicalities, and I'm glad I've got an expert here. I'm sure you were following the Normandy format discussions in Paris in the past few days. There's some concern about how in the end communique, it was worded that the word conflict in Ukraine, rather than describing it as an international conflict. Could you, with your expertise, say if this is going to disadvantage Ukraine at all?
As to the qualification of the conflict, so according to the, if we take into account the report of the ICC, for example, it qualified the conflict in 2 ways. Conflict in Crimea separately is international armed conflict between Ukraine and Russia since February 2014. And as to the situation in eastern Ukraine, so the situation here is more difficult because the ICC stated in the preliminary examination, it's not the final qualification, that there are two parallel international conflict, international and non-international conflict. But the court also said that in the further examination, they may do not exclude that there may be one single international conflict if they define that the Russia has overall control under the illegal armed forces of Donetsk Public Republic and Luhansk Public Republic.
So would they then group the Crimean occupation along with the conflict in the Donbas into one conflict, or would they still consider
No, I mean one conflict. So in Donbas there are two parallel international, and it may be defined as one unified international conflict in Donbas, and of course it may be connected to the annexation of Crimea as one single conflict, yes.
Thank you very much for joining us today. We enjoyed having you. That was Vitalia Lebid, a lawyer at the Strategic Litigation Center of the Ukrainian Helsinki Human Rights Union. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.